because he swears they signed it.
His dedication on that.
They said if you would know it, that would be appreciated if they have signed the contract. And I know it's already Tuesday, but he did call me.
You're moving quicker than you thought.
Collins isn't working, so
Oh,
I'm real happy about it. And Matt's on there.
since we have a virtual meeting. I'm not.
I'm here.
Okay, it's 5 o'clock. Matt Munslinger's on
I
there.
didn't want to go to the Y. Depending on how late we go, I'll go to the Y after this.
Okay, good evening, everyone. This is a special call, joint City Council and Board of Public Works meeting Tuesday, October 5th, 2021, 5 p.m., City Council Chambers, City Hall. I'd ask the clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmembers Beach. Here. McCoy.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Dobson.
Here.
Councilmember Franke.
Here.
Mayor Hark.
Here.
Councilmembers Bowen.
Here.
And Welch.
There being a quorum present, I call the meeting to order. We're here tonight to discuss infrastructure planning, development, and funding according to the agenda. And with that, council, the floor is open.
What do you want me to say, Mayor?
I was looking to see that as well.
I'm teasing, Mayor. Mayor, I think we set this meeting. There were various possibilities and ins and outs of figuring out ways to fund capital improvements. There was also a discussion of the stormwater utility, which had previously been created, but which the voters had rejected a funding source for. And I think what's been discussed so far has been, is that something that the council would like to take that back to the voters? Is that something where the council would like to take back the concept of stormwater and instead consider it just to be a standard capital improvement? Or is there some other method we haven't thought of to fund that? There was discussion, as I recall, there was a discussion that we should have the Board of Public Works come and perhaps opine as to what they think might be a good idea, or if they have ideas, and that's where we left it.
I might say I sent out an email that originated from Andy Dorian, and the idea was in regards to half-cent infrastructure sales tax. He proposed a 7-year tax that would bring in approximately $1.6 million a year, or $11.2 million over the 7 years. As you can remember, if council isn't aware, that the electric fund is owed about $1.6 million from stormwater projects that's already been completed. So breaking that out over the next 7 years comes to approximately $230,000 a year. Part of Andy's idea, and I think this is a good idea, is that along with the board and the council, compile a list of the 10 large stormwater projects I'd like to see led by Matt Munslinger and Andy, with the oversight by the city manager and the Board of Public Works general manager. Select an engineering firm, do an assessment of our biggest concerns, and rank them. The city council and city manager would have final say on the projects that are chosen, and then plan one big project a year, which would have cost approximately $1 million. The director of central services would be the project manager for the project, with the assistance from the director of operations at the Board of Public Works. This is similar to what we've done previously to replace the Humpty Dumpty Bridge, head lane culvert, and the Union Street stormwater repair. This would allow us to complete 7 big stormwater projects during the time frame, and then after that, there'd be approximately $370,000 a year left for city infrastructure projects, which we need desperately. We've got a large list of houses on the demolition list that'd help with that list. And then projects that could be targeted, up to the council include alley paving, sidewalk, curb replacement, more housing, commercial building demos, like we mentioned, minor stormwater repairs such as addressing public storm pipes, culvert replacements or replacing storm inlets, and then replacement of the HVAC system at City Hall that's in dire need, and funding for matches for state and federal grants. Hopefully it'll be available there, but you have to have the money to pay the match, so that would help with that. Of course, the city manager and the city council provide guidance and input on where they would want the funding to be spent with assistance from the department heads. Ultimately, a project list would be completed each year and approved by the city council during the budget preparation. So I think it's a good starting point, and like to, I send it out to council, here if council has other ideas, and also the Board of Public Works. I had forwarded that to Darren and asked him to forward it to his board members. So I hope those board members have given that consideration. I think, it's a starting point to go forward and, just listen to people's ideas. So if you all have some, please voice.
Going to start off with
I know you by face, but you got to announce yourself for this.
Oh, this is Bill Fisher.
Okay.
If the board members like to come to the table, that'd be great. And you just pass around the mic.
All right.
Kind of formal, informal here, but
First of all, I'd like to say that we at the board all support stormwater and taking care of that. We're willing, we're just not able yet. So we're interested in your ideas. I don't know that I've got a particularly better one. We do have some ideas. We do have a few concerns about trying to slam it in the April ballot. But if we can all be assured that that's covered and we've got the proper planning and publicity out there that we think this will work, then it's your all's ballgame. So,
Well, my idea was it's come so close in the last two. And if you remember the flood wall, back years, it took three elections to get that done. With a little effort from everybody in this room, just talking to a few neighbors and knocking on a couple of doors and answering a few questions, I think we can be successful at this.
So Mike and I talked about this yesterday informally, and unfortunately we disagree on most of the major points, except that it has been close the past couple times. I commend Andy and Mike for trying to take this on, because frankly it's a hot potato that nobody really has been wanting to hold for too long. That being said, this is a short-term fix that is not specifically for stormwater. It can't be dedicated to stormwater. And I think if you give most of our voters, a choice between a short-term fix and a long-term solution, like we put on the ballot in April 2019, that would need a few tweaks since then. But if you give folks the choice between a short-term fix and a long-term solution, they're going to pick the long-term solution. And that's what I think we should be pursuing. The utility invested $225,000 in a Black and Veatch study to build out a utility. It was right then and it was right now. So that's where I am.
So what you're talking about is trying to breathe life back into the impervious field.
Correct.
We share council, and the council has made it very clear that the impervious does not fly on floor.
Not exactly.
Based on guidance that I'm aware of from the Missouri Public Utilities Association, an impervious area fee will fly if it is approved by the voters and collected on a property tax instead of collected through a fee at the utility bill. Right? And it can be dedicated.
Misunderstood.
Well, there is a Missouri Supreme Court case in which the St. Louis sewer district attempted to use an impervious fee, and they attempted to do it based upon a rate, and they purported to promulgate, well, they didn't purport, they promulgated a rate and they started charging people. They got sued, and it made its way up to the Missouri Supreme Court, and what they said was that the way they had created it was a violation of the Hancock Amendment because they felt that, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, but they felt generally that there wasn't a good way to use an impervious surface to measure exactly how much water came off of any person's particular ground. So it's not an absolute ban to the concept of impervious. I think that's probably an overstatement of what that case says. I'm not going to tell you that it's not possible you could read it that way, but what I'm going to suggest is what they really hung their hat on was the fact that it was a Hancock-type fee. They didn't necessarily say it was a tax, but that it was a Hancock-type fee, and for a Hancock-type fee, you are going to have to take that to a vote of the people. So there's probably a middle point between maybe your understanding of it and I think even a little further from what Councilman Franke said. I think the version he articulated is probably the most conservative view that I'm pretty confident is not going to suffer a challenge. I think there's probably someplace a little further than that if you still wanted to do something with an impervious fee. I don't know that it needs to be called a tax. I think as long as it's voted on by the people, it can still be called a fee. It's just that it's a Hancock fee, not a standard fee.
Just to be clear, my main fascination with that and preference for it is that it would be dedicated to stormwater. It could not be spent on other things, and it would be a long-term fix instead of a, kind of a stopgap.
So does it come down to who do we believe is going to be more eager to pay? If you look at Rain's perspective, it comes down to everything. So you have a number of people who are homeowners, and they have a house and a driveway, and the rest is dirt. The ratio makes sense for everybody. Similar to that. Then you have the corporations, churches, whose majority of their land is factory pavement. So the putting that on industry and churches.
Churches don't pay taxes.
Churches would be exempt,
They don't pay taxes.
right? But it's not a tax.
If you said, and that was my point to a slight disagreement with Councilman Franke is if you do it as a tax, I would agree churches wouldn't pay it. If you do it as a fee and base it upon impervious surface, so long as it's approved by the voter, churches would pay that because they do have that amount of impervious surface.
Okay.
It has a difference as to how you set it up and what's approved by a vote of the people. Obviously, I'm not a decision maker here. I'm just going to throw out a couple of things. I think your real distinction in the two primary things that have come through here are: do you do it on a sales tax, which potentially is supported by people who are not necessarily here? You can have that be supported by people who are visitors here who are going to pay a sales tax. I think the biggest objection to that it's a sales tax, is going to be the argument that a sales tax bears more inversely on people who are less able to pay it, whereas doing it on the impervious surface, with the exception of churches, there's going to be an argument that is going to be a burden upon those who are better able to pay it. The problem that you run into is you don't want to create a climate where you run off all of your industry because they're like, well, that's crazy. That's just one more tax. Whether you call it a fee or whether you call it a tax, et cetera, you're just trying to tax industry. We're going to go find some other place to go. So, I mean, it's a balancing act. There's absolutely no question of it. And I think a lot of the council, and I know not the entire board was here when the council was talking about it, I think a lot of the council feels that it's more likely that the people could get behind a sales tax, and I think their belief on that is the fact that it doesn't just have to be used for stormwater, and it could be used for capital improvements as is deemed appropriate by the council. And again, I don't mean to speak for them. I'm just giving kind of what my spin was on what I heard. So I think there's no good option here. You know, there's nothing where I smiled a little bit when you said, what are people most likely to be willing to pay? And I think the answer is nothing. I think that's what we would all prefer is to pay nothing. But obviously, if it's something that has to be done, I think to a certain extent, I think a lot of the council's opinion was, well, if we consider that to be a capital improvement, and if it's within the control of the people who are subject to the pleasure of the electors, they can be voted in or out of office, that it's going to be more likely that people would feel comfortable with that. But that's not to say that there's not merit to the thing that Councilman Franke proposes either.
And to jump in, I do want to make it clear to you folks, I'm up here scrambling for my life because I know I'm in the minority, and I feel very strongly that something that James left out unintentionally, I'm sure, that the sales tax, again, cannot be dedicated to stormwater. That's what I'm up here pushing. I'm pushing that the impervious area fee can be dedicated. In terms of scaring off industry, I don't buy that because, frankly, stormwater funding solutions are coming down the pipe across this country in the next 10 years. And even if they're not dealing with them now, they will be soon.
The 7-year sunset on the sales tax, I believe, would make it more appealing to the voter, knowing that, you know, there's an end to it. But then again, you know, 6 years down the road, you're showing progress on what the council said that you're going to do, so that you can go back in year 6 and ask for, you know, an extension of that sunset. You know, if in fact you're doing what you said that you were going to do with those funds. So in that case, it makes the council more accountable for those funds, and also, you know, gives the voter, you know, I guess an option to come back if we don't say what we're gonna, you know, what we're gonna do. If we don't, you know, provide that within those, you know, 6 or 7 years, you know, they're not going to vote for it again. So it gives them an option to out if the council's not doing what they say.
I think Bill was raising his hand. I don't want to put him on the spot, but Mike and I rehearsed most of this conversation yesterday, so we're well practiced at it. And something I didn't think of yesterday when we were talking, in the next 7 years, it's highly likely most of us will not still be around, at least not in our current position.
I'm playing.
Right there?
I'm not going anywhere.
Okay, well, good luck. Better you than me, brother. That's a risk to take when I don't know that we need to take one, because the dedicated impervious area fee lost by 12 votes 2.5 years ago. And since then, we've had multiple major stormwater failures. And Matt's not here tonight. Heath is long gone. Andrea's not here tonight.
He's on right here, though.
Oh, hi, Matt. But those three folks, you know, in January of 2019, the education level in this community about stormwater was nearly zero. And in a matter of 3 months, they did a Herculean job of educating this community. So it's not like we're talking about streets or electric or something where people have a base level of knowledge about it. They went from 0 to decently informed in 3 months. That's Herculean. They only lost by 12 votes in the 2.5 years since then. There's been more education. Andrea's been out there doing a lot of stormwater education in the schools and with service clubs. On top of that, there's been major stormwater failures. I firmly believe if we took a standing, dedicated, impervious area fee back to the voters, it would pass 2.5 years later.
Are there any other board members that want to speak, or any of us council members dive in?
I'm a little bit in step with you. I'm probably the odd man out. But I'll fight. So, here's a few issues I have. Is, let's take Martin Street. Just look at Martin Street had a major failure, took so much fight. I mean, this road is for citizens that have to get up and down this road. It is hard to get from Chestnut and all that up there without that road. I mean, this is, you guys may not think so. This is a major fairway to the residents of that neighborhood. So 18 months, 2 years, somebody help me before we got this repaired.
It costs double.
We repaired it. If you drive over that street, I'm on South Side of Lot, my father still lives there. This street was paved. It has no curbs, no sidewalks. It's already washing away. I mean, this is my issue. If we don't allow all the entities of the city to be involved, is repairs. You cannot say we're going to make the stormwater repair and not make the complete repairs and put it back to where it's suitable for citizens, voters, community. I am so frustrated on watching that. I've seen it project after project after project. I'm dying to see more street. I'm not going to lie to you guys because I bet that thing's done to the nines with sidewalks and curbs and everything. Well, if that one's done like that, then Martin Street should be, Chestnut should be, and every other street. And I feel like the only way I can make sure for the voters and the citizens of this community that we do their projects and we do them from start to finish the way they deserve is to make sure that everybody's involved. I don't have the mistrust of the council not to make repairs to the water because I said on the at the very height of the stormwater debates, and I know how concerned every one of these members are about stormwater. I don't have the mistrust that they're not going to put in or the $1.6 million that year or the $1.3 million that year. I also have served in this community, and I know the other infrastructure needs. I think everybody's probably well aware we haven't had property tax increases. Might have to help me here. James, 73. We haven't had a sales tax increase over a decade. I don't know any of us that can operate in we can't go without raises and things like that in our own lives, in our own budget. The city has done that, but it's also why we have the water issues that we have because there hasn't been. I trust the board to make the repairs. I trust the city to make the repairs. Maybe I'm too trusting, but I just don't see going with the sales tax. It's not going to be used appropriately. Listen, I think we've got, again, I will say this again, and I'm not going away from stormwater. I live on Magnolia. We have a major stormwater issue going all the way down Magnolia, around the hospital, down over Broadway, down into Chestnut. We've had several failures, so I'm well aware nobody wants to hear it. Corey, cover your ears. We have a hospital and many other structures that at some point is back to the taxpayer to take down. I'm sorry, you guys, they are. Many of these schools, these churches, they have, and hospital buildings have been dumped on us. And something about allowing that to happen. But those are going to come to a state. We're not going to be able to take it. And now, we're not going to definitely. But I also see that non-storm issue and concerns. If a sales tax increase, then I've tried to look for, and I know the information here is here. Does anybody remember the number of impervious fee, what it would be collected in a year?
I know, please don't hold me to this because we've been through,
I'm thinking directly in my mind what I think.
yeah, we've been through a number of these and I'm not sure I'm getting water mixed up with impervious area. Black and Veatch called for $3.5 million in annual funding, half of which was operations and management, half of which was below ground infrastructure. And I want to say a residential customer was going to see $7 to $10 per month on their bill. So over the course, Bill's shaking his head, so that makes me feel good.
That's the number I remember as well.
Yeah, and so it'd be $120 a year, as discussed. It's equitable and it's fair, so the larger paved surface you have, the more you pay. Melissa, thank you for bringing us together. Also, just real quick, I want to make a quick distinction. One of your big concerns is that an impervious area fee or any sort of dedicated funding structure would only handle what the charter ascribes to the utility, which is below ground stormwater.
Yes,
That
and I'm
leaves-
basing that off
yes.
Off of what I'm history.
Yep. Oh yeah, no. And I just want to clarify for people watching at home and maybe for some council folks who may not be aware, but that still leaves above ground stormwater. That's inlets, that's outlets, that's culverts, that's ditches, that is storm drains. So your point is well taken. From me, I disagree, but it's well taken.
So you just helped sell the sales tax because of all the other things that you listed besides the stormwater.
I understand we have to make it fair, but again, if we're not doing a job, if there's no funding for exactly everything you just, this is a terrible way, this is not a good way to look at it, but I think you and I have actually had this conversation. We're going to do all this, we're going to know, Andy, we're going to do all this, repair this underground. Nobody's ever going to see that. They're not going to realize that you just spent $1.6 million to put, new storm water drains underneath the area. What they're going to notice is whether you streets and sidewalks back, whether they're able to get back into their driveways of their homes or get up the streets. That type of thing. So if there's no funding for that type of thing, then do we still have to fix the stormwaters? Yes, absolutely. But what a disjustice are we doing to our citizens? I mean, if by halfway doing this, again, Martin Street. Council ought to be lucky I don't live on Martin Street.
So let me ask you about Martin Street. Did Martin Street have curbs and did they have sidewalks before that project?
Well, it went over to the side and then there's driveways. But Mike, are we just gonna put it back the way we found it? I mean, then heck, leave half of the streets unpaved.
Well, that's not my point. Is they put it back the way that it was,
Not all the houses, it's another area.
and you want to compare North Street. North Street's got sidewalks. North Street's got curb and gutter. So they're going to put back what was there.
Oh, I'm sure we will.
The issue with Martin Street is that it's already washing away and it's going to need to be repaved in the spring. That's the issue, that it wasn't done correctly.
So
It wasn't the street department that paved it either, just to clarify. So.
Fees couldn't agree to be used to resurface roads.
that's her point.
Exactly.
And so I think Mike and Melissa's points are incredibly well received. especially the ones about not being able to see the stormwater projects. And I think that's my point too, actually. It's just on the flip side of the coin. We have this huge, massive liability that nobody sees. The sidewalks, the drains, they are huge liabilities also. But they are a drop in the bucket compared to the below-ground stormwater issues. I think our engineer could agree. I think our general manager could agree. I mean, these things are life-changing for the city, and that's why, in my opinion, it is more important at this specific time. On top of that, as I said last Tuesday, and as I've been trying to drum up some ideas for, there are other revenue sources that the city can pursue to tackle above-ground stormwater topics. We're not there yet, and this is more important right now, but it's not an either-or, it's not an end-all be-all, it's not the end of the world if one doesn't happen right this moment, because we can work on other solutions that will get us there in or around the same timeline.
Can somebody who knows more about this address the future? Let's say impervious versus sales tax. 10 years from now, are we limited by land mass of the city to not be able to grow that fund compared to increased revenue of retail, increase the percentage of the sales tax? I haven't looked at it.
That was my
enough to
question.
even know what to look at 10 years from now. If we dedicate, I don't know if you know what I'm saying, but if impervious is there, is the city limit going to grow? Will that grow the impervious compared to sales tax and increase in revenue?
Are you asking theoretically or are you asking legally?
No, what would long term do best for the future increases for this fund or fee, whichever?
So from a practical standpoint,
Yeah.
I see.
Mark has.
I might be able to. So,
Can you come up here? Can you come up closer, please?
yes.
Mark.
So if you're doing a utility, you have utility customers, correct? And you have something like 8,000 water customers. You have 8,000 storm. So are we going to see the number of customers increase? See the area that increase itself? That's really the question. It's based off impervious area. You know, is General Mills going to go add 10,000 more square feet of park? 50? Joe homeowner add a drive. Those things are unpredictable. But one thing I think customers haven't really seen. I'm sure you guys can look at that story. I know we're probably somewhere in that 7,800 to 8,000 customer range. So
Well, you're making an assumption that every single square foot of ground is going to be covered by somebody who's paying utility.
well, you're going to
Paying
have
a bill.
you're going to
But if they're not, it's not going to change.
yeah.
I mean, if a field is a field, it's not going to change it tomorrow unless they pave it, and that changes it.
What my point is, you can't predict how much impervious area might increase. You have a pretty good historical information. And I wanted to make a presentation about the building. That's $7 to $10 a month. That's 7,800 customers. That does not add up. Back in that math. It's gonna have 30.
That was for residential customers. That was without factoring in commercial customers. I can't speak for a random commercial customer because there's not a standard commercial lot size or impervious area.
So I'm just saying the number of customers hasn't really changed. So you're going to have to get your increase on that route. Increase it.
That brings up
I mean-
another, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
That brings up another thing is the committing to put a driveway or a garage going to be tied back into the system that calculates the square footage that going to be added, increase their impervious?
That's an in the weeds question that might Matt might be best for.
Right, but Board of Public Works billing system is the one that's being talked about doing that. So if that's running independently, and there's no, I'm adding a garage, so you better add that onto the fee, if there's no connection there, then the changes are never going to be monitored.
Well, I will say that, and Mark can speak to this too, but that, that portion of the code that would fall under MS4 probably, is yet to be written. So that part of the code we know is going to have to be updated.
Yeah.
So it says that right now in the subdivision code. So,
I mean, it would require like the building inspector to go out there and reevaluate, or somebody at BPW to reevaluate, and, you know, that kind of thing. Otherwise, it will stay the same.
And you can raise the fee as needed, and I don't know about the tax and Hancock implications, but I mean, like other things, you can raise the fee.
But if I have 2 acres and then I add a huge parking lot that's happening, will I need to get a permit to add that? And will that permit
it's the
translate?
engineer.
If I got 2 acres and I want to put a big paved lot,
If you're commercial, yes. If you're residential, there's no method in the code that permit.
so in that situation, even though it's rare, but it's going to morph over time as impervious gets added, whether it's a garage or driveway or whatever, basketball court. If you have 2 acres and you add a quarter of an acre to pavement, if nobody permits it, nobody tracks it, he adds it to the BPW's billing system to track percentage change of that residence bill that accounted originally for what it accounted for, but it doesn't add the extra track.
You're essentially going to be in the tax assessment. Having your own assessor that has to track it, got to change. Great, I mean, be that, I wouldn't want to be in the tax.
No, I know, but
But that's the only way you track it.
those are where the weeds are.
That's a big administrative.
Oh, yeah, so I don't know who's going to do that.
All of that was accounted for in the Black and Beach plan that you folks paid $225,000 for. And I can't speak on it. I'm just pulling it out of my butt here from what I remember from a few years ago. But it was based largely on, I don't know, biannual or every 3 years or something, satellite imagery updates, and then case-by-case updates as needed. And as Lisa said already, that portion of the code has not been written yet. I think that's all fair to
I
say.
haven't looked at the Black and Beach close enough to know anything.
I got a lot of presentations on it a minute ago.
All right, just a couple of things I had, and I'm not, you know, proponent either way, because I feel like this is discussions. These are ways that we can come together and find what's best for our community. Taking some points from what Melissa said, and also Stefan. The sales tax idea, while, yeah, it's a addition here in the city, sales tax on goods and items, I also look at the people who visit our city and those who live just outside the city, whose stormwater has greatly affected the load capacity of what we have in our city. It's not a surprise or goes unnoticed by anyone that development west of Hannibal, and their lack of stormwater retention plans there, has created a more of an influx of stormwater coming into our city. Head Lane, for example. And it blowed out. Now we got a huge amount of rain, overloaded to begin with, but the addition of those impervious surfaces outside the city has caused a burden to our infrastructure, and I think that's why we're seeing increased failures, not only because it's 200 years old, but I do think that has an effect on it. So that's one reason I kind of thought the sales tax was a good idea, because it is spread amongst everyone in the region. And sorry, Hannibal is in the valley in a low spot, and all the water runs towards us from Minnow Creek, New London, water coming off from Rawls County, from north Bear Creek, all the way out 36 past the hospital. We get it. So that's just one kind of thought I had as far as the sales tax. And then to Melissa, to your point, stormwater projects underground, I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around it. And maybe it's a legal thing that I just don't understand. So I'm throwing it out here for fear of looking dumb, but I also want to be educated. Let's use Martin Street. If the stormwater system below collapsed and created damage to the street and the sidewalks, and in order to fix that, we had to tear out the street and sidewalks to fix that stormwater conveyance. It seems like it's one project to me, that you would fix the sidewalks, the street, and everything that the failure of that stormwater conveyance system caused. Like I said, though, I don't know, is there a distinction that you can't, that it can't be the whole project? I mean, I'm sorry?
That's how it would be, unless it's that limited grant. Union Street is an example. The match on Union Street is street. So the grant is not going to function. That is the match. Typically, so the street department does the salt cuts. So I use Radcliffe. Radcliffe had a massive water main. Took out half the road.
Yeah.
All the way down. Board of Public Works comes in and fixes the water main. The street department comes in and fixes the road. Water pays for the asphalt.
I see. Yeah, so it is one, considered one
Right,
project,
sidewalk.
but it's
It's a
a
sidewalk.
partnership project, but it's all
So
one project.
they contract us to do it, or they would contract with another contractor. Yeah, it would be the one, in that scenario, the board's responsibility.
Mayor, I think, kind of rephrasing your question, since Melissa said that the impervious surface fee would only pay for underwater, then if Martin Street had a problem underground that tore up the street, the sidewalks, the curbs, it'd put back the underwater conveyance, but not pay anything for the streets, for the gutters, for the sidewalks. And am I correct there?
I think Andy,
That's exactly what.
So could the ordinance be changed?
I'm not aware that it is chartered. Policy.
well, I can speak on this. The underground at the utility is chartered. The above ground is not chartered. Is that right, James?
The charter specifically puts underground stormwater on the board. It provides no funding source. It doesn't explain how that's supposed to happen. I think it probably has to do with the fact that the world was a very different place when our charter was drafted, and there wasn't so much concern about, are you spending electric money on electric? Are you spending sewer money on sewer? Plus the fact that there was not so much distinction between storm sewer and sanitary sewer at the time, and the combination was just, hey, of course they're going to take care of that. I would say that the charter says, got these things that the board has to take care of, and then the board also has to take care of any other improvements that the city builds and says they have to take care of. So does that include above ground? Yeah, arguably. Is there an argument that inlets are part of the underground collection system? Because that's the actual language that the charter uses. Yeah, possibly, inlets are, so, and then to further complicate, and I'm sorry to get in so far into the weeds, but you guys asked.
Yes.
If you had another utility that, for instance, say the gas company came in and they had to make repairs to the gas line, the general rule in Missouri is they have to pay to put your street back if they dug it up in order to fix their gas line, et cetera, et cetera. So the issue is it appropriate for us to say to the board, well, you're making a repair to underground, therefore you should have to pay for or help us or whatever in regards to the street under that theory? Yeah, I think that's a fair argument. Is that what a court would find if somebody decides to litigate it? I don't know. there are no absolutes, but I can tell you that I think there's at least a decent basis for that claim because of the fact that other utilities are required to fix our streets if they have to tear up streets or sidewalks or whatever in order to make repairs.
Right.
Well, if you don't have any
really.
funding, then it's all academic anyway. It's just not going to get done.
And I would add, we don't talk about above ground below. The lion's share of calls in that month.
Yeah. The calls that I get
The
are above
public
ground.
doesn't see collapse on the streets for the most. They do when a street's closed, like Martin Street. They don't know about what's going on. You know about the water river crossing over and so that's all. I mean, that's all I've said the whole time.
That's what the public's,
Like, we can't go and tell the public, hey, we're going to do this and fix the below ground, and meanwhile, they're still suffering.
their perception will be
They're going to be livid.
what they see, and that's above ground.
I think the mayor's hitting on a good point, because isn't that kind of how we ended up in this position after 200 years? It's because we've been ignoring the stuff we can't see. And I think Melissa's, I don't want to speak for you, so maybe I'm helping you along a little bit here. You're maybe exploring a solution where the board might take on more of the above ground responsibility?
The repair from start to finish. But I think, here's where I think I need to connect the dots, and I think this might be Karen. So, and it might help the council, the rest of the, but let's look at, as far as, let's look at the sales tax. Let's look at what that looks like financially, as far as the amount that we'll have to spend on repairs. I think Darren kind of touched on it. Darren kind of knows where I'm going. And then let's look at the other. What does that look like as far as the funds we're using, stretching our funds as far as we can? So if we go with the sales tax and hiring in, what does that look like for? Like, if today we decide, okay, we're going to go with the sales tax increase, what does that look like for you?
So I think Andy, this email alone, sales tax going with that, $6 million. That's where I'm at. The fee, entirely how you said. Let me throw a little bit out here, and I'm going to speak to you from my heart. I don't have the emotional tie to the street, but I do know that I have the job of taking care of that stuff around. I have no money. So this discussion, thank you, fantastic. But let's keep talking about it. When it comes to rates, there is the best rate for everybody is to have your own individual rate. But there's also a science to it, and that science is simply what's going to pass. Because whether it's a rate, whether it's a fee, whether it's a tax, we're going to have to take that. It's got to be passed. So, unfortunately, I think we've got to keep in mind here, all in one fight. I don't know. That's you, the professional, call. Okay. But let's start somewhere. The other thing I would say is we need to do a sunset so that people agree to give us that chance. There, Andy is absolutely right. Pipes under care, so we, meaning Lisa and I, we're gonna have to earn the trust of the people. That money, whatever it is that you're going to get for us. So that idea of what pass has got to be kind of first and foremost. I don't care how we do it. Give us a chance.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need guidance. You talk about what's up. Well, Union Street is that little bit section, $700,000. I mean, so in the grand scheme of things, when you're looking at how many projects, it's not very many. It's probably a big one a year.
But it's going to be the same if we go the other way. I mean, if you're looking at, and I'm using these numbers, but if we're 3 million, and you got 1.6 in O&M, you got 1.3 million you're spending on repairs. So, and I'm just, listen, that's the citizen taxpayer. When I look at how responsible we're spending money, then let's look at how we're spending money. So even if we go with it, and we're getting 3 million in fees, whatever we're gonna, and we're only spending $1 million on repairs, then we're only spending $1 million on repairs. If that means that Darren have to do a whole nother utility and all of these O&M, if you will, and all of these employees and all of this overhead, and I mean, when you talk about, we already owe the electric fund $6 million, and 400,000 of that is for study. Guys, I have a chill. It goes down my spine that just makes me scream. I understand we have to do studies, but already owing almost $400,000 for a study to a utility that isn't money, that's hard as a taxpayer and a citizen for me to swallow. So my question, I think, is, and to just, because I can't come up with professional words right now, what is going to give us more bang for our buck? Where are we going to get the bang for the buck on because that's what, especially if you're only getting, again, one project a year, $1 million, you've got $1 million, one project a year. What's going to give you more bang for the buck? And say our money more wisely, less money on O&M and more money on repairs.
Is there a state law saying that sanitary sewer utility can't cover storm sewer?
No, actually, that's right.
Underground pipe is underground piping. We lay pipe, we're laying sanitary, water line, storm sewer, everything.
The concern is going to be whether sanitary and storm are separate issues, because where you run into problems is an allegation that you're misspending funds. The question's going to be, is spending sanitary money on storm the same as spending electric money on it, which would be that you're misappropriating funds. And the reason why I would suggest that's maybe something you need to be concerned about is we're not governed by the PSC. As a public entity that owns the utility, we have the ability to go out, have public meetings, promulgate rates, et cetera, et cetera. If we promulgate a rate, but it's not appropriate to include in that rate storm, then you run the chance that you get the whole thing set aside, penalties, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, that's why I think in the past, the board has been very, very hesitant to consider storm and sanitary to be the same thing. And I think the problem is that, like I keep saying, back when they did the charter, they were dumping storm into sanitary quite often. I mean, they were still doing that up into the 70s and the 80s, which is why the board has had all the issues they've had with going out and having to ask people, please disconnect your gutters from the sanitary sewer. You're overloading the system, blah, blah, blah. And it's a change in opinion, and it's a change in the understanding of the science. And the problem is that the law hasn't caught up with what both the science and the facts are. And so we've got this Supreme Court case and some other things saying, oh, well, storm sewer just isn't even a valid utility, basically, because how can you measure how much water comes off of any particular property? You know what? Figure it out. And if there's no money to pay for it, then you can't figure it out. Yet, the EPA and Missouri DNR are coming down the pike with all kinds of new stormwater regulations. It is going to blow up. Something is going to have to change, but whether something's going to change in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, I don't know what to tell you. It's probably going to take somebody a chunk bigger than us is going to have to sue the state or sue the feds and get some kind of an answer out of the courts that says, hey, you know what? We think you could do this and this and this, because otherwise you can't live up to the unfunded mandates that are coming down from on high from the feds and the state.
I want to jump in and continue my private conversation with Melissa here. The 3.5 million from the Black and Beach study, that was roughly half O&M, half capital, so 1.7 each. But that's not part of the ballot language by any means. That was their suggestion on how to build a utility. You good folks at the utility board of directors can divvy up however the heck you want as long as it's spent exclusively on stormwater. I wish Matt was here in person to talk more about it, but the reason why the O&M is so high relatively is kind of like Andy and Darren have been talking about it, is in the first few years to learn and wrap your arms around it, to borrow a phrase from my past. And that's the part that prevents future problems. So we have some big problems to deal with right now, but the O&M is the part of the utility that prevents future catastrophic level problems because you're in there doing the work, scoping, making repairs, preventing catastrophic failures. So thanks for entertaining me, and vice
Paul,
versa.
you've been just waiting, and I'm sorry, I didn't want to exclude you there.
I'm going to go back to.
A little bit closer,
Oh, can you get a little closer if we can?
or the microphone's over.
Stand by anything.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
I was going to go back to your question of how do we get the most bang out of our buck you're asking about. And so in looking at this whole issue kind of broadly, we looked and reached out to some other communities just to see how others have handled it. And by no means is there a one-size-fits-all solution, but we did see that there's cities out there, St. Peters, Wentzville, Columbia, that what you would do is at a dedicated funding source, an impervious fee, for example, where you do that you have $1 million coming in every year, you'd go out and you'd do a $40 million bond. You know, and you stretch that out over 15, 25-year time frame. And so then, you know, as long as you had the $1 million coming in to meet interest payment, all that would be set up ahead of time. You'd have $40 million to. And it can't just be willy-nilly. You'd have to have a very, very good plan set in place of projects. And so kind of the way I see it in my mind is what we would do is likely somehow get a better assessment of what's out there, priority, some of the bigger ticket items. Because like somebody said, if we were to do the sales tax and have $1.6 million a year, by the time you pay back the electric fund, which I might add is the number one priority. With us going out for a bond here on the electric fund, we're already anticipating that is going to be a pretty significant dent in our rating. Just the fact that the electric fund is so I will say that is the number one priority. But stretched out over a 7-year term, $283,000 a year, pay the electric fund back. You add in the MS4 compliance, which again has to be done. That's estimated $80,000-$90,000 a year. We're already up to $400,000 a year there. It just doesn't leave a ton to do with like one big project a year. And that's if all the funding is there. So with the impervious fee, it does give you that dedicated source to where you can long-term bond. Whereas if sales tax, if you sunset it, obviously you can do that. So that's just one thing to think about, and I think a solution that other cities have went through. Definitely reach out to get more information on it.
Well, in your experience, if there were no sunset and we decided, is there any actual way on?
Fall back on
City won't be liable to pay it.
Right. Answer that So I think it how you think state that is plus bonding is very expensive, and how much capacity you have, how many projects actually realistic.
Certainly, and I think I was just looking in terms of biggest bang for your buck just for.
Okay, so you gotta make that clear.
Okay.
Yes.
I was gonna say, because you can do a lot with $40 million.
Oh,
Just saying.
Right.
But however, if things were changed, and we're talking project from start to finish, we're talking inlets, we're talking a lot of other stormwater related things into there, I could be sold.
Well, I mean-
Listen, I'm all about getting whatever we need done to the best of our ability, being as wisely financially and with taxpayers. That's what I'm about. So that's very important to me. I'm so glad you said something. Listen, I could be sold on that. I'm not going to tell you I think, but I could be sold on it. But if it includes a lot of the aspects of stormwater issues that we're having, then listen, I've got no trouble with that. Is the city still in trouble? Sure. Got a lot of issues also. So, however, addressing stormwater.
Well, I think the bigger thing, this goes, stuff is kind of a council decision. What do you want to do? Do you want this all to be, dedicated to stormwater? That would be awesome. That would be fantastic to have it dedicated to stormwater. Do you think you can do both? I don't know. That's a question. Do a designated tax? Do it combined? I think that's just a big discussion. I think we'd all love to be able to have both. I don't know if that's not. Citizens really
Right now,
want.
we need to get something passed that will pass, start working on the problem, and then we can take care of the criminals 5-7 years from now. So the whole program of services climate might change, but it might have different laws in place.
Well, and that's what we as staff from you all, is that direction. Which way?
Mayor, if I could, we haven't heard from our economic development director. My question for him would be how detrimental to bringing new businesses and jobs to Hannibal would an impervious tax or fee be?
Well, if you look at your Black and Beach is $3.5 million, and that's covered by residential. 2.5 is a burden on commercial. I mean, that's all of the business, commercial business. That's still a burden.
With $7 per resident.
I was going 120 a year, 8,000 customers. That's $906,000. Sorry.
Corey, please.
So I think it depends on how it's structured. I think sometimes you see other communities, somewhere we have electric rates.
We're not picking you up. That's all right.
You can take mine.
Because mine doesn't work.
Okay, so I think what you see sometimes in other communities, I guess my point to the Mayor Pro Tem's question would be is how it's structured. So sometimes I've seen other communities look at a tiered rate structure, like you see with the electric rates right now with the large user rates, where you could protect some of the larger companies that have been mentioned here tonight, like General Mills and others, who would have a large burden. Obviously, if you just did a flat impervious fee at a certain percentage over the entire area, right? So I think it depends on how it's structured. Obviously, that will be competitive from community to community. Communities will be looking at that. You can count on that for both job preservation and current companies, but also those are looking to attract. So I think that'd be an important part of the conversation. I mean, we're continuing to have conversations with Darren and Matt right now about additional tiers, and large user rates, and some of the other utility things to try to be more competitive now. And I think this would require that same conversation. Obviously, I don't disagree with Stefan. At some point, these types of things are going to be coming down the pipe across the board. What I do believe we'll see is some communities be more competitive in how they actually parcel that to the commercial side, industrial side. So.
I can add in one more layer, and Corey might actually be able to help me. Maybe Bill will too, but as we're talking, I'm remembering more and more from the Black and Beach stuff. With some of those larger corporate clients, there were also stormwater retention and stormwater distribution solutions that they could invest in, which would considerably reduce their dollar responsibility to the fee. And that is a way to address, I think, your concern.
Okay.
But on top of that, it's a way to alleviate strains on the stormwater system themselves, which I mean, I think is something we can all agree is a good thing, because if they're creating their own on-site solutions, either percolating into the ground through special concrete or retention basins, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then that water is no longer flowing into our culverts and drains. And
Many of them already have that.
they do.
It's required in
DNR requires that as well.
So when it comes down to revenue, how are you going to get the revenue? How are you going to impact it? The structure.
Yeah.
They have those things.
And
Then how can you, they've already had to spend money on that area. It's something.
I haven't seen the Black and Beach report for a long time. I haven't been on the utility board for 18 months, but I know those things are in there. Yeah. So.
I read over it pretty quick, because I pretty much did last night. It does have some really great information.
You're just, Bill, you're just ready to go there.
Well, I've been trying to listen and learn, you know, I'm like Darren, and a little bit new to the community and don't have all of the history, starting up some of that. But basically, we're dancing around a problem, a taxing problem. The perception is, I think, community that won't support it because they haven't passed the tax new number. For me, 1973 was the last property tax increase. That's pretty insane. I believe that any entity could continue to. So kudos to the staff, city, and public utility. Stretching dollars to the extent that they have. There's no waste there. Don't sell the community short. I think this community has twice passed school referendums to include building improvements significantly. I was shocked they passed it so well. So I'm an optimist in that category. I don't have the details and proposal in my head closely, but it seems to me that okay, this is the minimum to getting it passed, and it is the getting it passed the issue. I have some concerns with the impervious street concept because of the administration. It is a nightmare to. You're going to have a full-time position trying to figure out and negotiate with the business community in particular what those fees are going to be. It just seems to be too onerous for this community to try to maintain a position like that, which then takes you back to tax. Call it a tax, call it a fee, depending on legal definition. But getting it on the ballot clearly, and I would think there could be at least written what it would look like as a ballot issue. Because it really is selling it to the taxpayer appropriately. List of projects doesn't have to be more than 5. I'm sorry, people don't read very extensively. They love it. So it really is how do you come together and sell the proposal to increase their own fees or taxes, as the case may be. Sales taxes certainly targeted. Doesn't give you the longest, best solution, in my opinion. Property tax does. Then you can bond it. Start to leverage those dollars for long term. But if the community is willing to the community is elected not, council, council is elected not to ask for money since 1973. Successfully. It seems we need to get some clarity in the proposal to these two groups in particular, writing. I'm a picture guy. I want to see what the written proposals are, written, two of them, written proposals to the voter, so that it's clear which one the council gets to select as the most appropriate. And finally, I think November is early. The earliest you should do it. April is tenuous. I think you've got some details that you need to get it out.
2022.
Yes, thank you. November is pretty close, isn't it?
Yeah, just wanted to.
You couldn't do it.
But it really is selling the public that you, and sales might be a strong word, but convincing the public that we have their best interests in mind, certainly, is addressed. I hate to do minimum. Really do, especially with building, construction, and infrastructure projects. Minimums will just increase your long-term maintenance. I have a city engineer that's here and several engineers, including online, that will attest that you do it the right way first time for 50 years. Not put a cheap culvert in and in 20 years replace it. You want it long. That's just based on my experience. Notes here. I think part of the convincing the public is, and the city's done a good job in getting grants. You know, frequently you're getting 80-20 splits out there. Federal government, the state government are giving you an 80% discount. All you got to do is come up with 20%, and I know communities around us that talk to them and to the county another life. They don't want to put their 20% in. They want to give me some money. Sorry. The well's running dry out there from the federal level to the state level to the county level. Certainly at the city. I applaud what's been done. But the taxpayer knows that. Nobody wants to pay taxes. Everybody wants to flush the toilet. Stop my speech. But so in long term, I think Andy's got a proposal that's doable to the minimum side.
And I'm going to add on that real quick. So this is something that this proposal is something that dates back a long time. Chief Davis knows, these are discussions that we've had for years and years. This is before even stormwater. This was, if you're going to do a sales tax, how would you pass it? Lots of things. Sidewalks, alleys, something that everybody could get. That is where this proposal came from. The stormwater thing came, we threw it as part of that too. So this was just a discussion that we had at department head levels for many years. But it is
So
one idea.
what you're saying is an idea such as this, it's only important to people if it has personal touch to it. I think we use that a lot in the crime stats. Nobody really cares about how many people speed on the highway until they speed down their street, and then speeding's real important. Until it touches you at home, until there's property damage in your front yard, you don't care how much vandalism goes on around everywhere else. So in a case like this, you're saying it'll be more appealing to the masses because they will, most anyone in this community either has a stormwater issue, a sidewalk issue, a street issue, or a great big huge hospital next to you. So
I don't think you can have a wrong answer. I mean, I think that way to look at it is correct. I think the way Stefan looks at it, a designated fee just for stormwater is
Right.
the correct answer.
I don't think there's a wrong.
No, it's just the prerogative.
I think if you get the voters to agree on a fee, like Stefan's talking about, that's great, like Andy just said. But then what happens in a year or two from now when we need that extra for other infrastructure? You're gonna go back to the voters and go, okay, now I need that half cent. No, I just gave you, I'm paying you $40 a month extra for this fee for stuff I can't see underground. It's a perception thing, you know, and I mean, Bill was kind of talking about that earlier too. I mean,
They'll look at us when they see that extra bill.
right.
Well, true.
But it's no different than your water service in particular, because everybody's passionate about water. And if you have to add $30 a month to a water bill, people are gonna scream about it, but they're gonna do it, they're gonna pay, they're gonna complain about it, they want clean water, they want fresh water. And it's the same thing, they want that water to go away from the basement. They don't want it backing up. And so I appreciate the mayor can't go out and cut a ribbon, storms. Just doesn't get any traction.
You could, but nobody
Unless it's
could.
backing up in your basement, then it does. So it really gets down to someone's got to pay the bill. And if you live in the community, and
I just want to add. How do they get 4 to 1?
you would know about that.
I'll tell you how to do that. All are on the same. And you talk to your it's consensus. Have to be all start on the same page. I've been a part of probably 16 bond issues, over 20 communities. It's just you start with your board just being on the same page. Agree. It's just communication. This is what we're that's you got to all be on the same page here.
And then you got to show them. You've got to show them. He said it's pictures. They're not going to read the reports. This is a great report, right? Nobody's going to read.
If you guys are on the same page or you aren't on the same page, it's not going to go anywhere. I think Darren and I would agree that we don't want a scenario like kind of what we have now is, no, that's yours. That's your responsibility. And the two entities are going, no, because neither entity has any money.
That's exactly what
Yeah, I mean,
But how likely is John Q. Public going to go out and vote for underwater conveyances that they can't see?
only lost by 12 votes 2.5 years ago. It's a dedicated source, and in the 2.5 years since then, we've had multiple massive failures.
The tax lost by 25 votes a few months ago. So, I mean, apples to apples.
Yeah, I don't disagree, but I'm saying we can go get a dedicated funding source.
So it really is.
I was poking at Melissa. My apologies.
So it really is census here, but it's also marketing what we are proposing appropriately.
Correct.
Through City Hall as well as HQ. So we can do that once a final decision is made. Again, my position is let's get something in writing on official guidelines. Let's get that solid. Because we can get into the weeds of solving block to block to block engineering problems. A lot of fun. Don't mind doing that. It's a good time solving problems like that. But
We don't need a decision tonight.
I think it'd be ridiculous.
Oh,
Decision.
I just want to make sure we don't talk until we're trying to go towards a decision and wear ourselves out and die.
Does anybody here have a preconceived We're on one side, they're on the other, you're on one side, they're on the other? I'm not. I'm like,
I'll put it here now. I hear about, City Hall and HBBW working together and stuff. And I really see it as all as one. We are all the city, and including the department heads here. So really this is us having a meeting because we always have to have separate meetings, but we're all working towards the same goal. And obviously, you're citizens and taxpayers as well, and you're representing those people in this community, as well as looking out for the, having the fiduciary duty towards that utility, which is our utility too. So I don't ever look at it as you guys and us guys. No, it's we. We are in the storm sewer together. That's
John, I mean, that's why me and Matt and Darren, we've been discussing, I think we're on the same page. We need just, we're all agreeing, we just need guidance and we're ready to fix it.
Well, you
Just
guidance
need-
and funding.
And funding,
And
right?
That's what I was,
There's no, there's no animosity there, there's no, like, we're all on the same page.
Near as I can tell, the only time constraint here we have legally is the MS4 permit. We have to continue to pay that. We'll have to fund that at the very least, until we make our decision.
From my understanding.
And we have not been dinged yet by the state yet, so.
Well, that's what I was thinking is, I believe up until earlier it was
October
2022. So you don't have that.
No, that's the deadline.
Oh, that's the
That's the
deadline to
deadline.
become in, okay, 'cause I thought they were still waiting on something we were
The
gonna do.
problem with MS4 is that's the city. So who's that bill go to? Because the city gave MS4.
I was gonna say,
I mean,
8
that's,
years ago, somebody else made that.
When we decide how we're gonna tax it, we'll make a
It's
decision.
ours going, and it's no big deal.
Okay.
but it's, I mean, when it comes to it, it's the city of Hannibal. So being, I think that'd be the bigger discussion. If there's no funding source.
Well, and I want to try to pick a fight with you, but the thing to remember is it's all the cities. The utility,
I agree.
the utility belongs to the city. The board is a separate entity which manages and runs the city's utility for it. So ultimately, both ownership, and I'm not trying to pick a fight with the board either, but ultimately, ownership and all responsibility goes back to the city, and it is the board's responsibility to manage the utility in a financially prudent way and take care of things. So the reason why I thought it was necessary to bring that up was just the point of, if the city has said that the MS4 permitting is part of the utility because they directed that they wanted the board to have a stormwater utility, it is part of the board's responsibility. To a certain extent, an unfunded mandate, but still, it
guess
would
that's
be.
what I'm getting.
Yeah, that's what and again, I don't mean to pick apart things you said.
Mayor, I've been writing down all sorts of stuff, and I'd like to jump in sometime.
be a frog.
Okay. Let's see. I don't know where the sunset idea came up, and I see no reason for it to be the 7 years, because we have many stormwater problems, we have many infrastructure problems that are going to continue to be found and such. So I don't know where the 7 years idea came from, and I just don't think that's a very good idea. For the taxpayers, I understand why you would do it, but from a council perspective, I just don't think that's a very good idea. If it's on property tax, it'll be a lump sum at the end of the year. Just for reference, my property taxes are about $600 if we do $10 a month. If that's what the impervious fee thing is, if it's on property tax, that raises our property tax by 15%. Nobody's voting for 15% raise of anything. The reason the property tax probably hasn't been raised, or property tax of the city's portion since 1973 is because if you start doing that, we have all these new fancy subdivisions going in. If we start raising property tax, will these subdivisions stop? That's the issue. We want them to come here and build. If it's cheap for them to build, they buy all of our lumber. They buy all of our utilities anyway. If it's hard for them to pay for their house after they're building it, it's kind of silly to build here anyway. You can bond a sales tax, so as we've all agreed, so you can still bond it out and things like that. The sales tax of 0.5%, if that's the minimum, we thought if you do the 0.25%, what's the reason? I mean, what's the point? It's $800,000. If we do the 0.5 cent, it's $1.6 million. If you start getting to 0.75 or 1%, sales tax increase will be over the 9% sales tax, which in our opinion, it was, perception would be bad. Then we get to, I think we can do 2.25 or 2.5% sales tax total. And then if we raise to the 1%, we would be close to the max that Missouri lets us do. So that's why we went ahead with the 0.5%. If BPW can lose by 12 votes after 3 months of cranking out meetings after meetings after meetings by 3 people, I surely think that the 30 people in here can definitely pass April. If we wait until November, then you figure out utility, you figure out other stuff, then all of a sudden we're into 23, the summer of 23. We have so many problems now that we cannot wait 2 more years to wait until November. So I definitely feel, we obviously don't have to vote tonight. We can come up with an awesome idea that I think both entities can come up with for a sales tax, put on the April, and we figure it out. The school passes everything because they're all on board, they do it great, they always win. If we do the same thing, there is no problems between BPW, if there's no problems between the city, we're all on the same board of doing it, we could definitely get it passed. If 12 votes for you guys, 25 votes for the city's part of it, surely together we could definitely pass it. So that's my pitch.
And maybe the sunset thing is my fault. I mentioned that in a sellability to the taxpayers. Because
I understand why you would do it.
Yeah.
The issue is in 6 years, in 8 years, we're having the same meeting, or at least Councilman Beach is, and having the same meeting and figuring it out then and trying to get it passed, for the next generation of taxpayers 8 years from now. And then we have to explain that to them also. I understand why there is the 7 years, but it's...
Yeah, that was
the
only
issues
thing.
are never going to stop.
Oh, no.
So,
I think the 7 years and then the sales tax initiative is more palatable to get passed. Because just like Bill said, it's a picture thing too, but it's the generation we live in. I don't want to pay for why not let the guys downtown coming off the riverboats pay for it? Now, we all know it doesn't really work out that way, but there's some merit to that, and I think that would be an easier sell to the public. With the political climate that we have in this country right now, especially coming up on a midterm election next year, we're going to be really careful whatever we put on the ballot, because there's not going to be a lot of appetite for anybody to help out the government, whether it be U.S. government or the city of Hannibal government. That's just my opinion. So
I absolutely don't see any reason. All you have to do is decide which option you're choosing. Once that's done, there's no reason why we can't make it.
That's 6 months of PR right there.
Yeah, that's tons of time. Listen, I'm not going back there, but you all know what I'm thinking. Don't tell me you can't get this done in 6 months.
Come on, don't water down your presentation.
Say you can't do.
Well,
18
and I've also seen other taxes similar to this passed, and then they asked later, shall it continue? When they put a sunset on it, shall it continue? And that's basically, when I look at the voters, they basically look at your grade card. Did you do with what you said you would do? Did you perform? And most of the time, if my experience has been, is if you perform well, then they'll continue it. The same as if we perform well up here, you get reelected. If you do not perform well, you are not reelected. So, that was just the way I was thinking to make, look, you got to garner the trust of the public and of the taxpayer. And mentioned political climate. Hey, it's not always been great. Not always. And, oftentimes we make mistakes. Well, you're going to make mistakes. You do something. The day we make no mistakes up here is when we've quit doing whatsoever. So, I'm not going to get on a long philosophical speech, but that's where I was myself with the sunset.
I don't want to speak for everybody, but I'm certainly getting intellectually exhausted. And I think we have a lot to think about. So unless anybody disagrees, maybe we wrap it up and make a motion. Thank you.
Can the council that doesn't have access to that Black and Veatch study get a copy of that to review? I'd appreciate that. I think that it's good discussion, like Stefan said, and we don't have to make a decision tonight. Bill, you guys have talked about that too. Let's take this stuff, these conversations, and I mean, a challenge to my fellow council members, let's go back and talk to our neighbors. I mean, nobody really wants to talk about a tax increase or paying more money, but why don't we just feel them out, you know? I mean, John, when you go to a Wyman's meeting, or, you know, Jeff, when you go to a JC meeting, talk to those people. Hey, we got to do something with stormwater. If you had to pick, which way are you leaning? Get some feedback that way, and that kind of maybe gives us some insight on what's palatable or not. Not a fun conversation to have, I can promise you. But, I mean, we all know something's got to be addressed, so.
So we've got a meeting coming this following Monday. It was, some of these guys are pretty new still. Actually, come Paul and Matt, come in and give them a little more education on that. And sit down and discuss it.
I think our part's done, right? I mean, our part was to come in here and give our point of view, so wait on the council, right?
And you said your next meeting is Monday, the 18th, correct? Okay.
I have learned a lot of things that I didn't have a clue that actually details of Black and Veatch, all their occasion. Powder drive or capital drive later. All these kinds of time. Got to do a pro and con. Longer. I'm not really going to talk to my neighbors. I asked them.
As far as meeting again, we want to just process for a week and talk about it again next week.
Mhm.
But it might not be. I'm just saying.
And you know, just looking at things here, would we do have a meeting, council meeting on the 19th.
I personally don't think that's a good idea if you're going to bring up to do this at the same Tuesday. That's what you're going to say.
If we're going to get together and
Another
it's
night.
be on a Tuesday,
I'm
do the
saying,
26th.
The 19th, by then you all can provide feedback amongst each other, and we can decide if the following Tuesday, the 26th, we can meet again. That gives you ample time to absorb things and also do research. Sorry? I think it would be pretty laborious to do it on the 19th.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Right. And your mind can only absorb what your backside can endure. So
So we'll just tentatively set for the Tuesday, that 26th then.
yes, unless
26, 5 p.m. here.
and we can set that. Right.
Good.
Makes and you know, in the meantime, obviously you got to check your schedules and make sure they're in the issue. Don't water it down. With that, so there's a motion.
Darren, is there a electronic copy of the Black Beach? Yes. So that can be emailed to Angel and forwarded? Yes. Okay. Okay, thank you.
I think we should all see that.
Daryl, I don't have it. I'm just pulling it out of my phone.
Yeah, that's fine. I haven't even looked at it, so.
Okay, so
I'll second Stefan's motion to adjourn.
adjourn. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you, thank you. That's, you know what? This might be the first time in the history that I know of that this type of thing's happened.